Hi everybody, this is Megan Garza with Megan Garza Wellness. I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner, health coach, and yoga instructor, and you're listening to the Restoring Balance podcast. More women than ever are now dealing with digestive, hormonal, and skin issues and are not finding satisfactory answers or results. On this show, I teach you how to implement holistic lifestyle, dietary, and mindset strategies to help you get smooth digestion and balanced hormones to reclaim your health, feel confident about your decisions, and to finally live life on your terms. Hello everybody, welcome back to the show. This is episode 16, and the title of today's episode is How to Support Digestive Health and Function. Before we get into today's episode, if you're a fan of the show, this is just a reminder of how you can support the podcast by giving it a 5-star rating on Spotify Podcasts, which helps the algorithm get my show to other listeners who would benefit from it just like you. Without further ado, let's dive in. The topics that I am going to cover in this episode is going to be what normal digestive function looks like and what abnormal digestive function looks like. Also, how the digestion system works, so things like stomach acid production, bile flow, enzymes, and the function of the intestines, amongst other things. The function of each organ, so that can include like what can go wrong and how does that show up, and also dysfunction. And lastly, how to support the system as a whole to restore proper function, which who doesn't want to have healthy bowels? So going into normal bowel habits, this will look like going to the bathroom, going poop 1 to 3 times per day. The stool is going to be formed like a sausage shaped. It's also going to float to the bottom and be a dark brown color. And you're also going to feel satisfied after a bowel movement. Abnormal bowel habits can include runny stools, loose stools, if you have a severe urgency to go to the bathroom, if you feel like you might have fecal incontinence or you do have fecal incontinence, constipation, so this would classify as going poop less than once a day, having smelly gas, having bloating or excessive burping after eating, floating stool, undigested food in your stool, foul-smelling stools, and also feeling unsatisfied after a bowel movement. Those can all classify as abnormal bowel habits. So how does the digestive system work? What is the proper function of the digestive system? So ultimately, the digestive system is a north to south process that starts in the brain and it ends at the anus. The brain senses food and parasympathetic activity is going to increase, so this is the rest and digest state. The mouth will then create salivary enzymes as you chew your food, and this is going to masticate it into smaller pieces to make it more digestible because your stomach does not have teeth. Your stomach acid can only do so much. That swallowed food then becomes bolus, and it travels through the esophagus into the stomach. The bolus is then mixed with hydrochloric acid or stomach acid, which is at a pH of around 4 to 6.7, and it turns to chyme in the small intestine. The chyme enters the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine, and cholecystokinin or CCK hormone is then released to slow emptying. As the bolus moves into the small intestine, the gallbladder, liver, and pancreas will then help aid in the digestive process. So the roles of these organs are the liver is to release bile, which is then stored in the gallbladder. The gallbladder then releases this bile to emulsify dietary fat and break it into smaller pieces. And the pancreas releases digestive enzymes to break down the bolus further. In the small intestine, bicarbonate is released, which decreases the acidity of the chyme because it has to be at a certain acidity in order for it to properly digest and move through the intestines. Peristalsis moves the chyme through the small intestine where some bile is reabsorbed, and peristalsis is the involuntary constriction and relaxation of intestinal muscles. So this is responsible for helping move the food, which turns to bolus and chyme, through the entire digestive tract. Whatever is left over after the small intestine will then move into the large intestine where insoluble fiber, water, and some nutrient absorption will occur. This waste is also going to feed the microbiome. And lastly, the feces that are left over are going to be excreted out through the anus. So the digestive process is a very complex process, and it requires many different systems. And the biggest part of the entire digestive process is the central nervous system. It has to be parasympathetic in order for all of this stuff to happen properly. So that was the proper function of the digestive system. So that is when everything is going great. That's when everything is working properly. So what does dysfunction look like? So starting at the brain and the mouth. So if the food is going to be consumed when you're under a lot of stress, this is going to trigger sympathetic activity in the nervous system. This can be caused by eating in a distracted state, or you're not chewing your food properly, and this can cause less saliva to be produced. And when you don't have enough saliva, this is really bad for your digestion because your saliva contains enzymes which are required to break down food. And then next we have the topic of stomach acid. So stomach acid has three main jobs. Stomach acid is required to break down protein. It disinfects the food against pathogens, viruses, bacteria, parasites, and so on. And it also frees nutrients from your food. So nutrients like calcium, zinc, and iron, to name a few. So there are two things that could happen with stomach acid. You could either have too much or too little. So starting off with insufficient stomach acid, what is going to cause this? Insufficient stomach acid can be caused by nutrient deficiencies. So things like not drinking enough water throughout the day in between your meals, or even electrolyte imbalance like sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. Also, if there's been a significant amount of damage to the gastric mucosa, so this can happen from too much alcohol consumption or even eating reactive foods, so like food sensitivity reactions that can lead to damage in the gastric mucosa. Also, a low protein diet can definitely impact your body's ability to produce stomach acid because if you don't use it, you lose it. So this can be really common in diets like veganism or the standard American diet because you're just not eating enough bioavailable protein on these diets. So when you see people that say they don't crave meat, it's not usually because of the meat itself. It's usually due to low stomach acid. Chronic stress and unresolved trauma can also impair your body's ability to create adequate stomach acid. So again, this goes back to the fight or flight. And if you are in that fight or flight state, your body is not going to think that it is safe to digest food. Acid blocking medications can also really impair your body's ability to produce adequate stomach acid. So histamine antagonists, which are medications to treat ulcers, and antacids are the most notable ones for this. And lastly, infections. So infections like H. pylori and also an E. coli infection, to name a few, can really impair your body's ability to produce stomach acid. So that's why getting checked for these things, if nothing else is working, can really prove to be a huge win for a lot of people because it'll give you more insight as to why your body's not healing. So now, what is going to cause too much stomach acid? So if there's damage to the mucosa lining, so that's basically the mucus lining in the stomach, it'll be thin and it'll lack the ability to properly produce adequate mucus. So if there's not an adequate amount of mucus in your stomach, that stomach acid is going to irritate the lining inside. Also, certain medical conditions, acute stress, and increased histamine can cause your body to produce too much stomach acid. Gastric vitamin C and other cofactors are also needed to grow new tissue. And if you don't have these cofactors and gastric vitamin C, the mucosa will not grow back. Also, conditions like GERD or ulcers can cause your body to produce too much stomach acid. And in a lot of cases, most people are actually dealing with insufficient stomach acid rather than too much. This kind of goes against what a lot of us have been told by mainstream narratives of, if your stomach hurts, just take antacids. It's because you have too much stomach acid, but a lot of people really are dealing with the opposite problem of that. Now, of course, everyone is different, but for a lot of people, this really is what is going on in their body. And now on to the emptying of the stomach. So delayed emptying can be caused by poor parasympathetic communication. So once again, if you're stressed, you might not experience the proper transit time and your stomach is not going to be emptying into the lower parts of the intestines. Also, this delayed emptying can be caused by inappropriate communication in the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine. This can be caused by either too much fat or protein in the chyme, or maybe even from insufficient digestive enzymes or bile flow. Or maybe the chyme is too acidic from hydrochloric acid, or maybe there's not enough bicarbonate that's being released to neutralize that acidity. So there are a variety of factors that can impair your body's ability to empty the stomach. And now moving on to dysfunction in the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. So first and foremost, the liver does so much more than just detox the body. There are a lot of different processes that it does, and one of them is helping with digestion. So in order for the liver to work properly for digestion, it needs water, cholesterol, phospholipids, amino acids, and other cofactors that are needed in order to create bile. This is why consuming adequate protein, fat, and cholesterol in your diet is so vital for liver and gallbladder health. And then as far as the gallbladder goes, the gallbladder is supposed to collect the bile to release and emulsify the fat. So poor gallbladder function can be caused by low fat and or protein diet, all of which are going to disrupt the ability to emulsify the fat. So your fat digestion is going to be compromised. And moving on to the pancreas. So the pancreas needs CCK or cholecystokinin and secretin for duodenal digestion, which is the first part of the small intestine. Not enough protein in the diet or fat can impact CCK production and also poor vagus nerve connection. This is why being in a parasympathetic state and eating an adequate diet of a balanced amount of macronutrients is going to help with pancreatic function. And another thing that can impact the pancreas is enzyme dysfunction. So inadequate macronutrient breakdown can impact the ability for the enzymes to be released. Also dysbiosis. So this is when there's an inappropriate gut bacteria balance that can impact your body's ability to produce and release enzymes, and also tissue damage to the organ. So if the organ has been damaged and there's tissue damage, it's not going to perform the same. And moving on to the small intestine. So dysfunction here, this can happen because of mucosal tissue damage. So this is what happens when the villi become damaged. And the villi are microscopic finger-like projections that are in the intestines. And this is going to gravely impact nutrient absorption. So this is what happens in a condition known as leaky gut. And basically what happens here is the villi, finger-like projections, are then flattened out, which can lead to nutrient deficiency and also toxins being leaked into your bloodstream. Dysbiosis can also impair small intestine function, and this is because the microbes are secreting endotoxins and it's going to elicit an immune response. So this can cause hyperpermeability, or also known as leaky gut again. So there's definitely a lot of factors that go into leaky gut. This is just kind of the tip of the iceberg for it. But yeah, dysbiosis and mucosal tissue damage are the major factors for small intestine dysfunction. And moving on to the large intestine. So the dysfunction that you'll typically see here is due to a lack of fiber in the chyme, and this is going to deprive healthy microbes of food. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the fiber dilemma in a minute, but for now, that's what I'm going to leave it at. Dysbiosis can also impact the large intestine as well. This is because poorly digested macronutrients in the chyme are going to be feeding pathogenic microbes, and this is going to further release toxins into your body. And lastly, we have the issue of transit time. So you have two things that can go wrong here, either constipation or diarrhea. So starting with constipation, this is usually due to a lack of bile, which is going to help with motility. And then also you have lack of fiber, dehydration, stress, and even structural issues in the large intestine that are going to contribute to constipation. As far as diarrhea goes, this is usually a symptom of irritation and inflammation within the large intestine. So this can be caused by infection, dysbiosis, food reactions, and even stress. And saying all that, it is really important to remember the system as a whole. So looking at the digestive system as a whole and not just addressing certain parts, because if you are just trying to address the stomach or the large intestine without supporting the entire north to south process, you're not going to see the results that you want. And it's not going to improve. Whatever condition you're dealing with is not going to get better, because it really is a holistic approach that you have to take to the body. So now, what can you do to support proper function? So I'm going to go over a long list of things that you can do to support your function and a smaller list. So kind of a condensed version of what I'm about to say. So first and foremost, this is probably one of the most important things, is just being parasympathetic when you are eating. So this requires you to sit down when you're eating and to take deep breaths into your belly for 1 minute. Also, visualizing digestion can be very important, especially just for that aspect of visualizing your body and imagining it doing what it's supposed to do, exactly how it's supposed to do that. And then also a gratitude practice can be immensely helpful, and just slowing down and showing yourself and your mind what you are grateful for. So don't eat in a distracted state either. So this includes things like driving, watching TV, or God forbid, fighting with your family or friend or whoever, because this is absolutely going to increase your sympathetic activity. So, driving is stressful, watching TV can be stressful, and you're just not completely focusing on digesting the meal. Chewing your food about 15 to 30 times per bite is going to make a huge difference, because like I said, your stomach does not have teeth. It can only do so much. So you want it to be like a smoothie consistency when you swallow it, because this is going to take some of the burden off of your stomach and all the work that it has to do. Bitter flavors or bitter supplements are also really good for stimulating digestion. It's great for the liver, it's great for stomach acid production, and so much more. And they just taste good too. Cooked artichoke, cooked kale, dandelion, dill, burdock root, dark chocolate, and even sauerkraut if you tolerate sauerkraut and you don't have histamine reactions to fermented foods. Now, to support stomach acid, healthy mucosa, and emptying. So for stomach acid, you can support your nutrients. So there are cofactor nutrients that are needed for acidity. This includes things like zinc, electrolytes, sodium, potassium, calcium, chloride, phosphorus, and water. So you don't want to be drinking this water with meals, because that's going to dilute your stomach acid. But in between your meals, when you are just going about your day, this is going to help your body stay hydrated as well. B vitamins, magnesium, and manganese are also great for supporting stomach acid. And once again, bitter flavors are very stimulating to hydrochloric acid. You can take apple cider vinegar or lemon juice with water before your meals to help support the acidity. And if none of this stuff is working, you're definitely going to want to get checked for gastrointestinal infections like H. pylori, because these can impair your body's ability to produce stomach acid. And if you do have an infection or infections, you're going to want to work on addressing that by eliminating it and also supporting stomach acid production in the first place, so it doesn't just keep coming back. And if none of this stuff is tolerated, especially if it burns your stomach, you're going to want to work on the mucosa lining. So focusing on healing nutrients for tissue growth like B vitamins, vitamin A retinol, and vitamin A beta carotene, and zinc, protein, and carbs, also omega-3s, and lots of antioxidants like berries. Cabbage juice, celery juice, and chlorophyll are also excellent for improving your mucosa lining. You don't need to go crazy with these things. You don't need to be drinking cups of celery juice every day or teaspoons or even tablespoons of chlorophyll, because that's not what I'm telling you to do. I'm not saying that that's going to help, because, these things also do come with implications. Like celery juice, it does absorb a lot of heavy metals and pesticides, but just kind of striking a healthy balance between that and buying organic if you can, because they are helpful, but you also don't want to overdo it, because there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. Aloe vera, slippery elm, and even marshmallow root can be extremely therapeutic to the mucosal lining. So you can take it like a drink or a juice or a tea. These are really ideal because they are closest to their whole food parts rather than just a supplement. But if you want to take a supplement, you can. But ideally, a tea or a juice would be better. Opting for smaller meals and cooked foods is going to be really helpful for your mucosal lining and just your stomach in general, because if you don't have adequate stomach acid and you're not producing enough, you're not going to be able to digest these huge meals as your body is trying to recuperate from not having enough stomach acid. So cooked foods are also a lot easier to digest rather than raw foods. And if you suffer from heartburn, you're going to want to avoid those triggering foods for a while. So things like caffeine, citrus, alcohol, minty foods, spicy foods, and even garlic and onion if that's an issue. And lastly, you're going to want to identify any potential reactive foods. So things like food sensitivities, you're going to want to pinpoint that and temporarily eliminate those foods until you can address the root of the problem. And moving on to liver and gallbladder support. So you're going to need to stimulate bile production because bile production is really essential for moving the food through the intestines and just helping you pass stool easier. So again, you need adequate stomach acid production for this. So it's not just like a one-off thing where it's like I can just support my bile production and just call it a day, because it really is supporting the north to south process as a whole. It's not just supporting one organ, it's supporting the entire system. So making sure that you have adequate stomach acid production in the first place is going to help your liver and gallbladder. Also, foods like beets, beet greens, bitter foods, and milk thistle can be very therapeutic for stimulating bile production. And eating adequate fat and protein in the diet, because this is going to stimulate CCK, or cholecystokinin hormone, which ultimately is going to help with emptying. And then the pancreas. So do not overload digestion. Again, smaller meals are going to be preferred in the earlier stages. So instead of 3 large meals or 1 large meal a day, maybe opt for 4 or 5 smaller meals throughout the day. Also, enzyme support can be very helpful for stimulating the pancreas and digestive enzymes. So foods like banana, pineapple, papaya, kiwi, apricots, and even fermented veggies and kefir can be very helpful for stimulating the pancreas and for helping with enzyme support. And lastly, moving on to the small and large intestines. So really focusing on healing and soothing foods is going to be so helpful for the intestines. You could focus on eating ginger. This could include things like cooking it in your meals, eating it raw, or even drinking it in a tea. Ginger has been shown to be so helpful and therapeutic for gastrointestinal disorders that I think everybody should be eating ginger if it does not irritate their stomach, because there's just so many benefits to it. And also, especially if you're dealing with constipation, ginger is going to help so much. B vitamins, zinc, and glutamine are also nutrients that your body is going to need for the intestines to function properly. Your circadian rhythm also impacts your intestines as well. So if you are not following a good bedtime, or if you have really poor sleep, definitely work on that, because it is going to impair your body's ability to heal, and also it's going to impair your intestinal function. So this means getting up at a good time, going to sleep at a good time, making sure you're sleeping through the night, you're getting sunshine throughout the day, and so on and so forth. Visceral body work has also been proven to be super helpful for your intestines, which is basically a gentle, hands-on manual therapy that is used to help your internal organs glide smoothly within your body. And even self-performed belly massages can be really helpful, especially if you pair it with topical castor oil. Eating a diverse amount of plant foods can also be helpful to the intestines, because this fiber is going to feed the microbiome. On the flip side of that, some people do need to go low or no fiber temporarily until their digestive health is stronger. Because if you have a condition like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, these plant foods can really irritate that. So it really is a bio-individual process with all of this. Some people are totally fine with eating plant foods right away. Some people need to hold off until a little bit longer. And it really just depends on the individual, because some people really need all the prebiotics that are in these plant foods, and some people feel significantly worse with them. So this is why it's really important to take all this into consideration and to realize that we are all different. Avoiding microbiome disruptors is going to make a huge difference in your large and small intestine as well. So these include things like chlorine, preservatives, antimicrobial soaps, pesticides, and antibiotic overuse. So these are going to all disrupt the microbiome and cause problems in the future. And lastly, on to the topic of diarrhea and constipation. So as far as diarrhea goes, consuming things like okra, beet juice, and activated charcoal, and even bentonite clay have been proven to be very helpful for diarrhea. And even a temporary elimination diet can be very helpful, because if you are eating something that is causing your body to react and give you the runs or even just loose runny stools, you're not going to know until you figure out what that trigger food is, take it out of your diet, and heal your gut and bring it back in later. And as far as constipation goes, you're going to want to bring in some bowel movers. So these can include things like enzymatic fruits, shiitake mushrooms, kefir, aloe juice, ginger, belly massages, long exhales, going for long walks, or even castor oil packs or internal castor oil. So with this one, you have to be very careful, because laxatives can be a temporary solution. They can also be very dangerous. So you're going to want to use a lot of caution if you choose to do internal castor oil. I typically just recommend just doing a castor oil pack on top of the intestines and over the liver, because that's a much safer alternative. You just don't want to do it if you're pregnant or menstruating. So with all that being said, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just the main points that I wanted to make about how to support your digestive health. There are so many other things that you can do to support your digestive health, but those are really the main things. So the main points in a smaller list would be to slow down when you're eating in a non-distracted state, making sure that you're chewing your food until it is a smoothie-like consistency, consume bitter foods to stimulate bile and stomach acid production, eat a variety of foods to ensure a wide array of nutrients. You can support your circadian rhythm, so again, sleep and sunshine. Eat smaller meals if the larger meals are too much on your stomach and your digestive system. And lastly, support your microbiome. So that's really it. That's all that I have for you today. I hope that you found this super helpful, because there was a lot of kind of high level stuff in this information, but I am so glad if you made it to the very end of this episode, because I know that it is going to help you and help you get closer to your goal. So just remember to take it step by step and to keep learning on your wonderful journey of wellness. That's all the time that we have for. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. Today we talked about normal and abnormal bowel function, function and dysfunction within the digestive system, and how to support your digestion for proper function. You can expect new episodes every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just a quick reminder again of how you can support the podcast and stay in the loop. So just make sure you sign up for my email list. That way you can be notified every time I post a new podcast episode, make any new announcements about my services and how you can work with me, and also receive weekly relevant tips for digestion and hormones so you can optimize your health. You can find the link to sign up for my emails in the show notes, or head to my website at megangarzawellness.com and you can wait for the pop-up or sign up under the freebies tab. Again, I just want to thank you for listening to this week's topic. Take care, everyone, and until next time.